loved him for 15 years. To make me give up, he played matchmaker and introduced me to his friend. But after I truly got together with Arthur, he regretted it. Chapter 1. Jordan's beloved got married. I thought that meant I finally had a chance. I stayed at his place with him for half a month, watching him drink himself into a stupor, watching his decay and loneliness, watching him slowly sober up. In the morning light, he wrapped me in the blanket, his limbs winding around me as he held me tightly, as if using all his strength. I tried to pull away, but he said in a restrained voice, "Don't move, Ollie, Ollie." Ever since Alice appeared, he hadn't called me that in a long time. That name had become hers alone. Feelings built from growing up together were no match for love that fell from the sky without warning. Every time I thought of it, I felt suffocated, like a sharp claw gripping my heart and then tightening around my throat. Now she had withdrawn from the relationship. We could finally be together, right? A few days later, Jordan took me to meet his friend. With a faint smile, he introduced me to the man, saying that although he was young, he was a good person and that we were a good match. We were in a quiet bar, under the shifting lights. I looked at him, and he slowly looked back at me. His face was characteristically refined and gentle. I caught what flickered in his eyes, a fleeting sense of loss. At that moment, what I felt was neither sadness nor anger at being pushed toward someone else, but a calm so complete it was as if something had been hollowed out of me. This was the explanation he gave me, or rather, a rejection. He had rejected me many times, so many that I had grown used to it. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped feeling hurt by his refusals. I didn't even feel the slightest sting of frustration anymore. I had long since stopped hoping that he would love me. In that instant, I suddenly realized that my feelings for him were gone. The young man across from me looked at me and said softly, "Hello, Alicia. My name is Arthur Bai, the same last name as Alice Bai." I thought about it and stayed silent for a moment. When he didn't get a response, his long eyelashes fluttered. Looking a little awkward, he curved his lips into a smile and added, "I was the one who asked Jordan to invite you out. Please don't be mad." I suddenly remembered, he was Alice's younger brother. In the summer after his sophomore year of high school, I had even been his English tutor. Back then, I was afraid Jordan and Alice were getting too close, so I tried every possible way to wedge myself between them. To stay on as Arthur's tutor, I tirelessly made him memorize vocabulary and grammar every day. When he refused to memorize, I would repeat the words into his ear over and over. Every morning, I stood at his doorstep with a vocabulary book, blocking his way. I annoyed him to no end, and just to shut me up, his grades improved at lightning speed. Later, he seemed to get into a pretty good university. I pulled my thoughts back from the past and smiled slightly. "So what you're saying with this round of drinks is that you want to pursue me?" His face instantly turned bright red. Jordan watched us from the side and took a sip of his drink. After a moment, Arthur seemed to make up his mind and said, "Is that okay?" I noticed Jordan put down his glass, his fingers tapping the side of it absent-mindedly. Arthur's gaze was scorching. When it landed on my face, I almost felt burned. I smiled, confirming that I felt no resentment or anything resembling revenge, and said calmly, "Then let's give it a try." The tapping sound stopped for a beat. Arthur froze. "Give it a try? How do we try?" He quickly reacted, blushing, and said, "Oh, okay." I said, "I don't have any experience with dating, so let's start as friends." Jordan took another sip, smiling as he spoke. "That's true, she has no experience." With that light, offhand remark, he brushed past the 15 years I had spent running toward him with all my strength. Of the three of us, only Arthur hadn't been drinking. He said he could take me home. Jordan called a designated driver. As he watched me get into the passenger seat of Arthur's car, he joked that I lacked a sense of security the most. So after getting together with me, Arthur must never get entangled with other girls. I knew his personality well and didn't think he was mocking me. Only at this moment did I finally realize something. Toward me, he did feel some guilt. Over these years, my pain and anxiety, and the bone-deep inferiority I felt in front of Alice, had not gone completely unnoticed by him. It was just that that girl mattered more. Before he ever made a choice, his heart had already leaned to one side. As the car started, Jordan took a few steps back, as if thinking of something. He looked up at me. After we drove a short distance, I saw his figure in the rearview mirror, his tall body leaning against the car, a cigarette lit between his fingers, glowing red in the night. Chapter 2. A week after I met Arthur. He held my hand when he walked me home. He kissed me downstairs. A kiss that suited his age, slightly awkward and still green. Afterward, he wanted to look at me but didn't quite dare to. A little nervous. He said, "See you tomorrow." Something seemed to pluck a string in my chest. That flicker of sensation left me momentarily dazed. If, back in adolescence, I had fallen in love with a boy like this, maybe everything would have turned out differently. I clasped his warm hand in return, stared at his face for a while, and smiled. So this is how people in their 20s date? He looked at me, confused. "Come sit at my place for a bit." Arthur's throat bobbed. Later, I realized this was how he reacted when he was emotionally stirred. Truthfully, at the beginning, I hadn't planned to go very far with him. A boy 4 years younger than me, and Alice's younger brother. Maybe he had once harbored a subtle crush on me during his hazy teenage years. But after real interaction, that vague fondness likely wouldn't be enough to support him accepting who I truly was. Flaws and all. But when I looked back, we had already known each other for 2 months. He occupied more and more of my time in my life. He would ask in advance what I wanted for dinner. Come pick me up at the office after work. We'd go to the supermarket together to buy groceries. I'd wash. He'd chop and cook. Once, for convenience, he asked me for a spare key, and I handed it to him quite naturally. When the key landed in his palm, both of us froze for a second. In a hoarse voice, he asked, "How about I move in?" I said no. He immediately said, "I'm just joking." Then he tested the waters cautiously. Then, "Can I move in next door?" I didn't commit either way. Who knew that 2 days later, he really showed up with bags and boxes, moving into the apartment next door that had been vacant for 2 years. In the middle of the night, looking dusty and disheveled, he knocked on my door and asked if he could borrow my bathroom because the gas at his place hadn't been hooked up yet. After showering, he stood there looking very appetizing, towel drying his hair, and said his place was too messy to sleep in. Could he borrow my couch for the night? He repeatedly promised he wouldn't do anything. I tossed him a blanket. He hugged it and slept through the night. A tall, big-built boy curled up on my couch, which was less than 1.6 meters long, looking a little pitiful. I secretly snapped a photo. The next day at the office, I couldn't help laughing when I looked at it. A coworker teased me, asking if I was in a relationship, said I looked much more cheerful lately. Was I? But it was true that I hadn't thought about Jordan for a long time before. Just associating that name with Alice would send a dull ache swelling up in my chest. Clearly, Arthur was Alice's younger brother. Their brows and eyes were so alike. That evening at dinner, Arthur asked me pitifully if I could spend his birthday with him the next day. Only then did I learn that the anniversary of Jordan's mother's death and Arthur's birthday fell on the same day. In past years, I had always been the one accompanying Jordan at this time. I would take leave from work, prepare ingredients, knock on Jordan's door. The two of us would stay inside all day without going anywhere, talking with him, watching movies, watering the plants on his balcony, then making dinner and waiting for him to finish eating. I'd drape a blanket over him and watch him slowly fall asleep on the couch. On the anniversary of Jordan's mother's death, only he and I remembered. He had told Alice, but Alice hadn't taken it to heart. The blow and trauma his mother's suicide dealt him weren't obvious to outsiders. Back then, rumors spread that his mother had been the one cheating, that she had almost abandoned her husband and child to follow her lover to the United States. So after his mother died, he went on attending school and classes as usual, with no visible abnormalities. But I knew he was sad. Every posture, every movement of his, even the expression of his smile, was steeped in sorrow. Girls are actually very easily moved by a man's vulnerability. That was when I realized I had fallen for him. I looked at the red-marked date on the calendar and silently deleted the reminder. Today, as usual, I took a day off. I spent the whole day roaming the Honor of Kings battlefield with Arthur and 2 of his classmates. Lunch was takeout. Toward evening, I received a call from Jordan, sounding somewhat exhausted. He asked me why I hadn't come. I said, "Arthur wants me to stay with him." There was suddenly no sound on the other end. After a long pause, Jordan asked slowly. Do you know what day it is today? I said, I know, but today is Arthur's birthday. Realizing that sounded too cold, I took a deep breath and softened my tone to comfort him. Are you okay? When you're feeling down, go for a walk, or call a friend to keep you company. After a long while, there was a faint from the other end, and then he hung up. After all, I couldn't be there for him for a lifetime, I thought. Chapter 3. When I woke up the next day, I found that Jordan had called me twice. The timestamps showed midnight and 2 in the morning. By then, my phone had already been set to silent, and I was asleep. Looking at those 2 missed calls, I thought of the times I used to fall out with Jordan, how I would lie awake all night. My heart twisted tight like a wrung-out dirty rag, dry and shriveled, sour and aching, until I could no longer endure it and would be the one to take the initiative to make peace. I never dared to call him. All I could do was weigh my words over and over, cautiously editing them into messages. Every paragraph, every word was soaked in helplessness and humility, so much so that later on, no matter what our arguments were about, Jordan grew accustomed to me lowering my head first. Then he would give a restrained nod, and we would make up, returning to how things had been. But last night, I stayed out too late with Arthur. After sending him back to his place, I only washed my face briefly before collapsing into bed, exhausted. If I hadn't opened my phone in the morning and seen his calls, I might have even forgotten that we'd had an unpleasant moment yesterday. I thought it over and finally replied with a single message. I fell asleep yesterday. Is something wrong? After sending it, I got up, washed up, and put on my makeup. When I picked up my phone again, I realized he had replied faster than I expected. Just a few words, nothing. The next time I saw Jordan was at the opening cocktail party of a friend's music bistro. Most of Jordan's friends overlapped with mine, but this particular friend had never been on the same wavelength as him. They disliked each other openly, and more than once she had urged me not to hang myself on that one tree. So his appearance there surprised me a little. He looked thinner, holding a glass of wine and standing not far from me. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. My friend shoved a plate of fruit into my hands, slung an arm around my shoulders, and steered me aside. Ignore him. Alice is here too. She chuckled. I invited her on purpose. I understood immediately. She nudged my shoulder, teasing. Look, they've gone over to each other again. I turned my head and saw Alice, dressed in a light, elegant long gown, walking toward him on her own initiative. Jordan stood where he was, his eyes lowered slightly, as if lost in thought, not moving. If it were the old me, I would probably be restless by now, my fingers trembling in embarrassment and hopelessness. The boy I had wanted to cradle and protect close to my heart, again and again compromising and retreating in front of another girl, his indulgence and leniency toward her would lodge in my throat like a bone, the pain unbearable with every breath. I could almost smell the metallic tang of blood rising from my windpipe. But now, aside from a trace of melancholy at the very beginning, there was nothing else. I was so indifferent that even I couldn't quite understand myself. My friend asked if I wanted to go play a few rounds of cards with her husband. I agreed. She looked at me strangely, reached out to touch my hand, and muttered, "Still warm, too." After a few rounds, my luck was good. I only lost once. She looked at me with renewed respect. Your head's really clear tonight. In the middle of it, Arthur messaged me, "When are you coming back?" I glanced at the time and replied that it would be soon. He sent back a happy emoji, "Then I'll come pick you up." I hesitated for a moment, then said okay. After we wrapped up, I went to the restroom. When I came out, I saw Jordan standing in the corridor, his brows slightly furrowed, his expression dark. I instinctively searched for Alice, but heard Jordan say, "She's already left." He took a deep breath, sounding a bit agitated. I couldn't tell whether he was explaining himself to me or trying to convince himself of something. "She's already married. There's no possibility for us." I didn't speak. My phone buzzed twice. I guessed Arthur had arrived and was about to unlock the screen to check, when Jordan grabbed my hand. He stared at me intently, his voice a little cold. "What exactly has been going on with you lately?" Chapter 4. Looking into his eyes, I vaguely understood what he was really asking. My phone rang. A friend noticed the movement over here and craned her head to look our way. I softened my tone. Let me take this call first. His lips pressed into a thin line. After a long moment, he slowly let go of me. On the other end, Arthur's voice was bright and cheerful. Alicia, I'm here. I'm at the entrance of the music bistro. I gave a soft I'm coming out now. After hanging up, I looked at Jordan. If there's anything, let's talk about it another time. I paused over how to refer to Arthur. A friend is here to pick me up. Jordan's index finger curled slightly, his telltale sign of restraint. Are you free this weekend? He looked at me for a moment. We haven't gotten together in a long time. I was silent for a few seconds, then said okay. Unlike last time, Jordan stayed where he was, watching as Arthur's car drove away and disappeared from his sight. In the car, I noticed Arthur seemed a bit listless. He drove absent-mindedly, speaking much less than usual. Just moments ago, he had greeted Jordan with a bright smile, every bit the boyfriend as he opened the car door for me. I thought I understood what was going on and deliberately teased him. Don't want to see me? You're clenching your jaw so hard. Arthur looked at me aggrieved. Are we actually dating right now? I hadn't expected him to ask that, and I froze for a moment. Arthur seemed disappointed. The rest of the ride, he didn't say another word. After dropping me off downstairs, he lowered his head, pulled out his keys, and walked toward his own door. I had the impulse to call him back, but in the end, I held myself back. Who knew that the moment I opened my door, my hand would be seized? Arthur's face held unmistakable dejection, as if he were grinding his teeth. You didn't say a single word. Do you know I won't be able to sleep tonight? I was stunned. I want to think it through before giving you an answer. I'm far too stubborn when it comes to feelings, honestly. I'm a little scared. His eyes lit up instantly. So that means you don't feel nothing for me? He curved his lips, unable to resist lowering his head and planting a loud kiss on my cheek. Then think it over carefully. Seriously, think it through. He stepped back a few paces and waved at me. I'll come get your answer tomorrow morning. In the bathroom, I splashed water on my face, only then realizing that the corners of my mouth had been lifted the whole time. My face was still burning red. For no reason. I felt a little embarrassed. That weekend, I was late. Jordan was very particular about punctuality. In the past, whenever I met him, I would deliberately arrive early. I rarely ever kept him waiting. But today, I had slept unusually deeply. The alarm couldn't wake me, and after I got up, Arthur fussed around me for a while. By the time I reached the restaurant, I was more than 10 minutes late. I set my bag down, sat across from him, and apologized. Sorry, I'm late. Jordan studied me for a few seconds. Work? I shook my head and took a sip of ice water to jolt my dull nerves awake. Overslept. His hand tightened around the glass. He gave a quiet I suddenly remembered it had been a long time since he'd asked me out alone. 2 years ago, after he broke up with Alice, he asked me to go to Shanghai with him to clear his head. I worked almost without rest for 3 consecutive days to finish everything, begged my supervisor for time off, and went with him on that trip to help him heal. But on just the second day, he was called back by a single phone call from Alice, leaving me alone in the hotel. I watched the gray-yellow sky above Shanghai Lake before sunrise, watched the iron-colored waves surging and rolling, facing the fishy, astringent wind. I walked along the long highway and finished my vacation alone. The server brought over the menu. He didn't actually like Thai food. This was a rare act of compromise on his part. How about going to the ice rink this afternoon? He suggested. You don't look too well. You usually lack exercise. Or we could watch a movie. There's a pretty good one out recently. In the past, I was always the one who planned these activities. I was afraid he'd be bored spending time with me, so I never let him rack his brain over such things. Today, he was unusually proactive. Yet I found myself lacking interest. Stirring my coffee absent-mindedly, I said, either is fine. Up to you. As soon as the words left my mouth, I noticed the perfunctory coldness in my tone. I lifted my head and, sure enough, saw Jordan's expression dim slightly. Still, he kept smiling. Then let's watch a movie. Indifference. It was a novel emotion. I no longer cared about everything concerning him. No longer had my mind filled entirely with thoughts of him. Even while talking to him, I would drift off slightly, wondering how Arthur was doing now. Before I left, he seemed a bit angry. When I came back to myself and turned my head, I saw Jordan's lips drawn into a faintly tense line. By the time the movie ended, it was already dark. Jordan and I walked along a tree-lined path. The cool evening breeze brushed past, carrying a gentle softness. He said, "Come sit at my place for a bit. I still have things to do when I get back." I said, "Then I'll take you home." "No need." Jordan suddenly stopped walking. Under the dappled shadows of the trees, he curled his lips slightly as he looked at me, his voice tinged with cool mockery. "So who has your attention now?" I didn't speak. "Arthur?" He paused. "Why is it that he always shows up at just the right time to pick you up?" "You too." He stopped for a beat. "Are you living together?" A heavy wave of exhaustion washed over me. I said softly, "Jordan, I have my own life. In the future, I may even have my own family, my husband and my children. I can't keep revolving around you like I used to." The hand at his side clenched into a fist. "You're already talking about marriage? Arthur is just an immature kid. You're taking this seriously, but he may not feel the same way. You're the one who introduced him to me. You should know his character." I said, "And you know my attitude toward relationships." Something turbulent surged fiercely in Jordan's eyes. Suddenly, he grabbed my hand and pulled me into his arms. In the past, even brushing fingertips with him would make me blush in hypersensitive embarrassment. But now, being held tightly by him, fingers interlocked, my chest felt nothing at all. He pulled back slightly and slowly lowered his head. His heavy breaths fell against my face, his fingers still tightly entwined with mine. He was almost about to kiss me, yet all I felt was strangeness and resistance. Instinctively, I turned my head and avoided him. Jordan froze where he stood. Chapter 5. He had been proud since birth and was rarely rejected, especially not by me. Almost instantly, his eyes reddened. In a hoarse, strained voice, he called my name, "Ollie." I lifted my head and saw a flash of helplessness pass through his eyes. I knew what he was afraid of. For a very long time, Jordan had been the center of my entire life. I was also my parents' beloved child, their pride, their only daughter, cherished and protected, never meant to suffer even the slightest grievance. Yet again and again, in front of Jordan, I bent my spine willingly, content to become a backup option, letting him trample my feelings underfoot. When I was 21, Jordan prepared to go abroad with Alice so they wouldn't be separated. That summer, I was like an empty shell that had lost its soul. I didn't even have the desire to cry. Day after day, I sat by the window in a daze. When someone came to talk to me, I would smile faintly in response. I thought I had hidden my desolation well, that no one could see how ruined I was until my hand trembled while boiling noodles, and the scalding water spilled over, splashing onto my foot. Dad lunged forward, carried me into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and rinsed my calf and the top of my foot with cold water. I said, "Dad, I didn't do it on purpose. I just suddenly had no strength." Dad didn't say a word, but his eyes quietly turned red. My heart clenched sharply in that instant. What is this supposed to be, without him? Can't you go on living? Mom scolded me through tears. So everyone had known all along. They had seen everything. While I was devastated by Jordan's departure, they were also heartbroken over my abnormal state. Later, Jordan came back alone. Alice stayed abroad and met the man who would become her husband there. Through their on and off 6 years, the one who had always stayed by Jordan's side was me. That burn never left a scar on my leg, but it built a fortress in my heart, one that held my family and friends, and my self-respect and self-love. From then on, I never neglected myself for Jordan again, nor did I neglect them, even though I still loved him. Perhaps only at this moment did he finally realize that even I was about to leave him. When I got home, Arthur had already finished cooking and was waiting for me. He was wearing a white t-shirt and gray lounge pants, tall and slender, his slightly long bangs covering his eyes. He looked at me with a bit of grievance and said, "The food's gone cold." Just that one sentence softened my heart. The day after we got together, he confessed everything to me. He knew I liked Jordan, so he deliberately asked Jordan to play matchmaker, hoping I would give up on Jordan and turn to him instead. But he couldn't bear to see me upset, and he was even more afraid that I would end up hating him. Afterward, He regretted it so much he wanted to bite himself to death. Even though I told him that I no longer loved Jordan. Not now, but long ago. Without knowing exactly when, my feelings for Jordan had gradually been worn away in the long, drawn-out tug-of-war. Still, Arthur was somewhat insecure. Every interaction I had with Jordan put him on high alert. He learned somewhere how to artificially create hickeys, standing in front of the mirror with an empty bottle, gesturing at his neck for a long time, vowing to make a love mark to show off in front of Jordan and declare his territory. Amused, I asked, "Does that even work?" He frowned, looking troubled. "Why isn't it working? Want me to help you?" I regretted it the moment I said it, because he immediately pulled me onto the sofa, pressed down over me, tilted his neck, and said, "Then you do it." My head went hot, and I really did lean in, biting and sucking at a small patch of skin. Arthur let out a muffled groan, caught completely off guard, his body stiffening even more. I didn't know how long it took to leave a mark, so I diligently kept at it for quite a while. "Stop kissing." His voice was low and rough. "If you keep going, I'm afraid I won't be able to hold back." Only then did I realize his ears were bright red, his Adam's apple rolling again and again. I hurriedly pulled away, but he still pinned me down, even slipping one hand inside my clothes. "Is it okay?" he pleaded. I took a heavy breath and refused weakly. "No." So soft, his gaze was scorching, as if it might melt me. He bit my slightly parted lower lip, buried his head at the side of my neck, and breathed heavily. "Alicia, you're so soft." Chapter 6. A few evenings later, after getting off work and returning from the supermarket with groceries, I ran into Jordan downstairs. It was already deep autumn in October. There was a faint chill in the air. He was wearing a black overcoat that set off his tall, straight figure. A cup of coffee was clasped in his hand. When he saw me, he pressed his lips together. I noticed that his knuckles were slightly red. Outside cars weren't allowed into the residential complex. He must have been standing there for quite a while. Our relationship had never been equal. I had thought that after what happened that day, given his pride and arrogance, he wouldn't take the initiative to contact me again for a long time. He walked over, fatigue evident in his eyes. "Ollie, I have something to say to you." I caught a faint smell of alcohol and guessed he must have had another bout of heavy drinking the night before. A few years ago, for the sake of his company, he'd been trapped in endless rounds of business dinners and card games month after month. Back then, Alice was still abroad. He was running on sheer determination, desperate to prove himself, with no regard for his health. He drank his stomach into injury and only began to rein it in after the doctor warned him. I glimpsed the pallor of his lips. The coffee he was drinking now was probably just to dull the pain. If this were before, I would have nagged him out of habit, then rummaged through my bag for soda crackers or bread to pat his stomach. My fingers twitched, then I remembered I'd switched to a new bag. Those stomach medicines and emergency snacks I used to keep for him weren't in it anymore. I was silent for a moment, then said okay. After going upstairs, I poured him a cup of warm water. He took the opportunity to grasp my hand, opening his mouth as if to say something. There was a knock at the door. I glanced at Jordan and went to open it. Arthur was standing outside in his pajamas, his hair a mess, eyes still hazy with sleep. He wrapped his arms around my waist. "I've been too busy these past few days. I just woke up and didn't even get a chance to go pick you up." He'd been pulling all-nighters working on a design, so I hadn't disturbed him. Behind me, Jordan stood up from the sofa and stared straight at him. Arthur also noticed the other person in the room. He paused for a moment, then smiled. "Good afternoon, Jordan." Knowing how petty Arthur could be, afraid he might overthink things, I took his hand and tugged him inward. "Come in." Arthur walked over to the bag I'd casually set on the coffee table and began taking things out one by one. Among them was a box of Okamoto condoms. "You bought them back?" The last ones were too tight, cut off my circulation. It was really uncomfortable. Before I could even react, Jordan had already swung a punch at him. Arthur's head snapped to the side. His lip bruised instantly, a trace of blood seeping out. He touched it with his hand and laughed. "Jordan, Alicia is my girlfriend." Then he said, "When you handed her over to me back then, didn't you ever think this day would come?" Jordan lowered his head to look at me, his face ashen, eyes blazing red. I heard my own voice. "Leave." For a period of time after that, Jordan often appeared around me. He didn't deliberately hide his presence, he would simply watch from a distance while Arthur and I went shopping, ate out, watched movies, or took evening walks around the residential complex after dinner. Arthur wasn't blind. Whenever he noticed Jordan's gaze, he would deliberately wrap an arm around my waist and kiss me on the lips. When he turned his head again afterward, Jordan would already be gone. I like a braised rice place on Jinkai Road. The broth there is rich and flavorful, but because it's too far away, it's not available for delivery, and I can't go often. When Arthur and I once went there on a date, I couldn't help sighing in regret over it. But recently, every day at noon, someone would leave a packed portion of that braised rice at the company's front desk and ask me to come pick it up. At first, I thought it was a surprise from Arthur. I tried to probe him indirectly, but he said he was so busy from morning to night that even if he wanted to, he simply didn't have the time. So later, I deliberately waited at the front desk right around lunchtime and discovered it was Jordan's driver. I told him I was already sick of it and that there was no need to bring it anymore. He nodded and let out a sigh. That evening, Jordan called me. From the other end of the line came his light, shallow breathing. He didn't speak for a long time. I said, "This Saturday, Arthur is coming to my place to meet my parents." After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I never thought you two would get serious." Ollie, his voice dropped lower. "I was wrong. If I say that I've only realized I was wrong at this very moment, do we still have a chance? Can you really let go of Alice?" I said calmly. 6 years of chasing and entanglement, how could anyone give up that easily? "And what about you?" Jordan suddenly asked. "Your feelings for me?" I stayed silent. That silence reminded me of 2 years ago, when I came back from Shanghai and faced a Jordan who had reunited with Alice. Back then, I had asked him just as hopelessly and foolishly, "What about me? What am I?" Then, at the time, he had also looked at me like this, silent, offering no answer. "I don't know what's wrong with me either," Jordan said hoarsely, letting out an abrupt laugh. "Ollie, do you know? Just thinking about you marrying Arthur, sleeping with him, kissing him, getting married and having children, and about how the rest of your life will no longer include me at all, it feels like something has been cut raw into my heart. So painful that my whole body curls up." He murmured, "When Alice got married, I didn't even feel that kind of pain, the kind that makes you feel like you can't go on living. Tony said that when I was drunk. I kept calling out Ollie over and over. He thought I meant Alice and even took out his phone to call her, until he heard me clearly say your name. From that moment on, I knew I was done for." "Alicia," he said softly, "this is the 16th year since we met. I love you." Chapter 7. When that word came out of Jordan's mouth, I thought my emotions would surge, that I'd lie awake all night. But in reality, I slept very well and very soundly that night. Hesitation and wavering, those weren't even things I considered. When my friend found out, she had originally prepared a whole bag full of words, ready to scold some sense into me and tell me to straighten out my stance and face reality. Instead, she was stunned by my calm and asked hesitantly whether I hadn't yet processed what Jordan was actually saying. When I told my parents in advance that I was bringing my boyfriend to meet them, they were also a little unsure. Over the years, they had seen clearly how deeply I felt for Jordan, and it left them shaken even now. After so much longing finally rewarded, after waiting so long for Jordan to turn back to me, I no longer wanted him. Instead choosing someone new, and that person was Alice's own younger brother. It was hard not to think that I had grown jealous to the point of turning dark, deliberately seeking revenge. "Ollie, can you really fall in love with someone else in such a short time?" My friend had asked me that day as well. That wasn't how it was. My disappointment in Jordan had accumulated little by little over the long years. Falling in love with him took only a moment, but it took me 10 years to heal from the hurt he caused me. Arthur just appeared at exactly the right time. He severed my last shred of wishful hope toward Jordan, allowing me to walk away cleanly, without regret, and letting me realize that I still had the ability to love someone else. If I could be liked by you, it would have to be the luckiest thing in the world. At my birthday party, Arthur looked at me gently and said those words. Because he was Alice's younger brother, he had witnessed everything, the entanglement among the three of us and all that had happened over these years. Amid the cheers and teasing, he looked toward Jordan and smiled. I should also thank Jordan for playing matchmaker. Jordan met his gaze without speaking, the hand hanging at his side clenched into a fist. Soon after came the gift opening. Every year before, I would spend several days preparing a present for Jordan in advance. When it came to my own birthday, he would habitually wish me a happy birthday and hand me a roly-poly doll dressed in red. I had collected 15 of those dolls. This year probably wouldn't be any different. I smiled, accepted it, and casually set the box aside without looking at it. But Jordan was a bit strange that day. After that, he kept watching me, as if wanting to speak but holding back. Even when Alice talked to him, he didn't listen carefully. He glanced toward me by the bar and shifted his steps in my direction. Arthur got there first, pulling me away and planting a firm kiss on my lips. I froze for a moment and asked him what he was doing. He explained innocently, "Truth or Dare told me to kiss one girl here. Who else could I kiss?" Touching my burning face, I just wanted to find an excuse to hide in the restroom. Jordan's gift box stayed in the corner. It wasn't until a few days later that I remembered to open it, only to discover he had given me a tongxin knot with a jade pendant. I remembered then, the first time I confessed my feelings to him. That was exactly what I had given him. We were still in high school. I'd watched a few historical romance dramas and foolishly believed that something made by hand was more meaningful. So I gave it to him on his birthday. Later, when I asked about it, Jordan said he didn't know where it had gone. This one was clearly newly made. The knotting was loose and a bit awkward, at a glance. It was obvious it had been done by his own hands. "Who gave you this?" Arthur asked with a smile. Then he saw the name on the gift wrapping, and his smile faded. I knew he was the jealous type and said helplessly, "I don't know why he would give me this either. If you don't like it, give it to me." He reached out and took it. An hour later, I saw a post on WeChat. Arthur had put the tongxin knot around the neck of a Shih Tzu. I had to admit, he was really a bit bad.